Question 1. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, mandates that member states implement a safety management system, SMS, to enhance aviation safety. What is the primary purpose of an SMS? To create a reactive approach to accident investigation. B. To ensure compliance with all local aviation laws. C. To proactively identify and mitigate safety risks. D. To replace regulatory oversight with self-regulation. Correct answer: C. To proactively identify and mitigate safety risks. Explanation: a safety management system, SMS, is a systematic approach to managing safety, including necessary organizational structures, accountabilities, policies, and procedures. According to ICAO Annex 19, an SMS is designed to proactively identify hazards, assess risks, and implement effective mitigation measures before accidents occur. It shifts aviation safety from a reactive approach to a proactive and predictive methodology. Question 2. Which regulatory body is responsible for investigating civil aviation accidents in the United States and making safety recommendations based on findings? A. Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. B. International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. C. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. D. Civil Aviation Authority, CAA. Correct answer: C. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. Explanation: the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is an independent U.S. government agency responsible for investigating aviation accidents and making recommendations to improve safety. Unlike the FAA, which enforces regulations, the NTSB focuses on identifying root causes and issuing recommendations. The ICAO provides global standards but does not conduct individual accident investigations, while the CAA regulates aviation in specific countries outside the U.S. Question 3. Captain Mitchell, an experienced airline pilot, notices an increasing number of flight deviations due to pilots misunderstanding ATC instructions. He raises this concern to the airline safety department. According to ICAO's Safety Management System, SMS, principles, what should the airline do next? A. Conduct disciplinary actions against the pilots to enforce stricter compliance. B. Implement a safety risk assessment to identify underlying causes. C. Ignore the issue, as no major incidents have occurred yet. D. Report the issue directly to ATC and expect them to correct their procedures. Correct answer: B. Implement a safety risk assessment to identify underlying causes. Explanation: under ICAO Annex 19, a core component of an SMS is risk management, which includes hazard identification and risk assessment. Instead of taking punitive actions or ignoring concerns, the airline should analyze the issue, determine contributing factors, e.g., ATC phraseology, pilot workload, training deficiencies, and develop corrective measures to enhance flight safety. Question 4. An airline's maintenance team discovers fatigue cracks on an aircraft's wing structure. According to FAA airworthiness regulations, what should be the next step? A. Continue flying the aircraft until a scheduled maintenance check. B. Perform an immediate inspection to assess the severity and comply with airworthiness directives. C. File an internal report but defer repairs until the next major overhaul. D. Apply temporary repairs without FAA approval and continue operations. Correct answer: B. Perform an immediate inspection to assess the severity and comply with airworthiness directives. Explanation: fatigue cracks are serious structural issues that can compromise an aircraft's integrity. The FAA mandates immediate action, including thorough inspection and compliance with relevant airworthiness directives, ADs, or manufacturer-recommended repairs. Delaying action or applying unauthorized repairs could result in regulatory violations and safety risks. Question 5. Which of the following is a primary objective of an aircraft's continuing airworthiness program? A. To ensure the aircraft complies with operational regulations, but not necessarily maintenance standards. B. To manage the operational efficiency of an aircraft without strict regulatory oversight. C. To maintain an aircraft in an airworthy condition through inspections, repairs, and modifications. D. To certify new aircraft models for commercial service. Correct answer: C. To maintain an aircraft in an airworthy condition through inspections, repairs, and modifications. Explanation: a continuing airworthiness program, as per ICAO and FAA regulations, is designed to ensure an aircraft remains airworthy throughout its operational life. This includes scheduled inspections, maintenance, adherence to service bulletins, and modifications as required. It is distinct from aircraft certification, which applies to new models before entry into service. Question 6. What is the primary purpose of an aircraft's minimum equipment list, MEL? A. To allow an aircraft to operate with certain inoperative components under specific conditions. B. To list all equipment required for an aircraft's airworthiness certification. C. To outline maintenance procedures for every aircraft component. D. To ensure pilots conduct mandatory full system inspections before every flight. Correct answer: A. To allow an aircraft to operate with certain inoperative components under specific conditions. Explanation: an MEL, approved by the Aviation Authority, specifies which components can be inoperative under defined conditions while maintaining safety. The MEL ensures compliance with operational limitations and prevents unnecessary grounding for minor faults that do not compromise flight safety. The Master Minimum Equipment List, MMEL, is established by aircraft manufacturers and regulatory agencies. Question 7. What is the primary reason for the analysis of cockpit voice recorder, CVR, and flight data recorder, FDR, data in accident investigations? A. To determine whether the pilots followed standard operating procedures. B. To assign blame for the accident. C. To evaluate passenger comfort levels. D. To enhance the design of future aircraft models. Correct answer: A. To determine whether the pilots followed standard operating procedures. Explanation: the CVR captures pilot communications and ATC interactions, while the FDR records flight parameters such as altitude, airspeed, and control inputs. Analyzing this data helps investigators reconstruct events leading up to an accident and assess whether human errors, technical failures, or external factors contributed. The goal is safety improvement, not blame assignment. Question 8. What is the first step in an aviation accident site investigation, according to ICAO Annex 13? A. Identifying the responsible airline and issuing penalties. B. Notifying relevant authorities and securing the accident site. C. Interviewing witnesses and survivors before assessing wreckage. D. Collecting passenger data and notifying next of kin. Correct answer: B. Notifying relevant authorities and securing the accident site. Explanation: ICAO Annex 13 specifies that the investigating authority must be notified immediately and the accident site secured to preserve evidence. This prevents tampering and ensures accurate data collection. Only after securing the site can forensic analysis, interviews, and cause determination begin. Question 9. An airline safety management system, SMS, identifies a recurring issue with aircraft maintenance discrepancies not being documented properly. As an aviation safety inspector, what is the best course of action to address this issue? Recommend additional training for maintenance personnel on proper documentation procedures. B. Immediately revoke the airline's maintenance approval certificate. C. Suspend all flight operations until all discrepancies are resolved. D. Ignore the issue, as minor discrepancies are common in large-scale operations. Correct answer. Recommend additional training for maintenance personnel on proper documentation procedures. Explanation. The FAA mandates that maintenance records be complete and accurate, 14 CFR Part 43.9. While immediate revocation of an airline's maintenance certificate option B would be excessive, corrective action must be taken. Suspending flight operations option C is an extreme measure unless safety is at risk. Ignoring the issue option D contradicts FAA safety requirements. The most effective action is to recommend training option A to ensure compliance and improve future documentation practices. Question 10. During a ramp inspection, an aviation safety inspector finds that an aircraft is missing a required emergency exit sign. The aircraft is scheduled for departure in 30 minutes. What should the inspector do? Allow the aircraft to depart if the crew verbally confirms passengers have been briefed on exit locations. B. Require the airline to immediately install the missing sign before departure. C. Report the issue, but allow the flight to continue since it is a minor defect. D. Allow the flight to proceed and issue a warning to the airline for corrective action. Correct answer. B. Require the airline to immediately install the missing sign before departure. Explanation. FAA Regulations 14 CFR Part 121.308 require clearly marked emergency exits for passenger safety. A missing sign violates regulatory requirements, and the aircraft cannot legally depart until the issue is rectified. Verbal briefings, option A, do not substitute for regulatory compliance. Reporting the issue, option C, without immediate action could compromise safety. Allowing the flight to proceed, option D, would be a violation of FAA safety standards. Question 11. Mr. Thompson, a captain operating an international flight, notices an unusual vibration in the aircraft's left engine shortly after takeoff. The engine instruments indicate normal parameters, but the vibration persists. He must decide how to proceed. What should Mr. Thompson do? A. Continue the flight as planned since the engine parameters are normal. B. Immediately return to the departure airport for an inspection. C. Shut down the engine and declare an emergency. D. Continue the flight but monitor the situation closely. Correct answer. B. Immediately return to the departure airport for an inspection. Explanation. Safety regulations prioritize precautionary measures in uncertain situations. FAA 14 CFR Part 91.7 Aircraft Airworthiness. Although engine instruments may appear normal, an unusual vibration could indicate a developing mechanical issue. The safest option is to return to the departure airport for an inspection, option B. Shutting down the engine, option C, without further assessment may be unnecessary and could reduce aircraft controllability. Continuing the flight, options A and D, without resolving the issue could increase risk. Question 12. Which of the following is a primary function of an aviation safety inspector, ASI, in overseeing air carrier operations? A. Conducting surprise in-flight cockpit observations without informing the crew. B. Evaluating airline compliance with FAA regulations and safety management systems. C. Directly managing airline maintenance personnel to ensure compliance. D. Developing new regulations independently without FAA approval. Correct answer. B. Evaluating airline compliance with FAA regulations and safety management systems. Explanation. Aviation safety inspectors, ASIs, are responsible for ensuring airline compliance with FAA regulations, 14 CFR Parts 119, 121, and 135. They evaluate flight operations, maintenance programs, and SMS effectiveness. Conducting surprise in-flight observations, option A, is not a standard ASI practice. ASIs do not directly manage airline personnel, option C, or create independent regulations, option D. Question 13. An aviation safety inspector conducting an accident investigation needs to analyze data from a flight data recorder, FDR. What is the correct process? A. Extract and analyze the data independently without airline involvement. B. Coordinate with the NTSB and specialized laboratories for data analysis. C. Allow the airline's maintenance team to interpret the data for efficiency. D. Review only written maintenance logs, as FDR data is not required for most investigations. Correct answer. B. Coordinate with the NTSB and specialized laboratories for data analysis. Explanation. Flight data recorders, FDRs, contain crucial information for accident investigations, 49 CFR Part 830. The NTSB, in coordination with the FAA, oversees the extraction and interpretation of this data. Independent analysis by the inspector, option A, is not appropriate, as specialized expertise is needed. Allowing the airline to analyze the data, option C, could compromise objectivity. Maintenance logs, option D, are useful but insufficient for accident investigations. Question 14. Which factor is most likely to contribute to a controlled flight into terrain, CFIT, accident? A. Pilot fatigue and reduced situational awareness. B. Clear weather and favorable wind conditions. C. Aircraft systems operating without malfunctions. D. Strict adherence to flight automation. Correct answer. A. Pilot fatigue and reduced situational awareness. Explanation. Controlled flight into terrain, CFIT, accidents often result from human factors, including fatigue and situational awareness loss, FAA AC 601134. CFIT occurs when a pilot inadvertently flies a properly functioning aircraft into terrain. Good weather, option B, does not prevent CFIT if situational awareness is compromised. Automation reliance, option D, can contribute to CFIT if pilots become complacent. Question 15. Aviation inspectors are reviewing an airline's emergency response plan. Which of the following must be included? A. Documented procedure for passenger compensation. B. Coordination strategies with local emergency services. C. A detailed explanation of airline marketing strategies. D. A method for minimizing flight delays during emergencies. Correct answer. B. Coordination strategies with local emergency services. Explanation. Emergency response plans must include coordination with local emergency services, airport authorities, and regulatory agencies. FAA Advisory Circular 155-20031C. Passenger compensation, option A, and marketing, option C, are not relevant to safety response. Flight delays, option D, are secondary to emergency management. Question 16. Which of the following is a primary consideration for an aviation safety inspector when evaluating an air carrier's maintenance program? A. Ensuring that the airline maintains its aircraft to the highest cosmetic standards. B. Verifying the airline follows a manufacturer-approved maintenance schedule. C. Checking that the airline has the lowest maintenance costs among its competitors. D. Confirming that the airline only performs maintenance during off-peak hours to minimize downtime. Correct answer. B. Verifying the airline follows a manufacturer-approved maintenance schedule. Explanation. An air carrier's maintenance program must comply with regulatory requirements, including adherence to manufacturer-approved schedules, 14 CFR Part 121.369. This ensures that maintenance is performed at the correct intervals to maintain airworthiness. Aesthetic considerations, Option A, cost minimization, Option C, and off-peak scheduling, Option D, are secondary to regulatory compliance and safety concerns. Question 17. An inspector finds that a pilot's flight hours exceed the legal limit under 14 CFR Part 121 for flight crew duty. What action should be taken? A. Allow the flight to continue if the airline has a history of excellent safety performance. B. Report the violation to the FAA and instruct the airline to reschedule the crew. C. Allow the pilot to continue the flight but require rest before the next leg. D. Issue a warning and let the airline decide on corrective action. Correct answer. B. Report the violation to the FAA and instruct the airline to reschedule the crew. Explanation. Under 14 CFR Part 121.471, flight crews must comply with duty time limitations to prevent fatigue and maintain flight safety. If a crew exceeds the limit, the FAA must be notified, and the airline should reschedule the crew to prevent further violations. Ignoring the violation options A, C, D could compromise flight safety and violate regulations. Question 18. Which of the following is the primary responsibility of an aviation safety inspector during an aviation accident investigation? A. To assign blame for the accident. B. To prevent further accidents from occurring through immediate regulatory action. C. To gather evidence and provide technical expertise to the investigation team. D. To ensure that passengers receive compensation for their injuries. Correct answer. C. To gather evidence and provide technical expertise to the investigation team. Explanation. The role of an aviation safety inspector during an accident investigation is to provide technical expertise and assist in gathering evidence, 49 CFR Part 830. The goal is to understand the cause of the accident to prevent future occurrences, not to assign blame, Option A, or handle compensation issues, Option D, which fall under different procedures. Immediate regulatory action, Option B, may be necessary later, but it is not the primary responsibility during the investigation. Question 19. Which document should an aviation safety inspector refer to when determining if an aircraft is compliant with airworthiness directives? A. The airline's operations manual. B. The aircraft's maintenance logbook. C. The aircraft's certificate of registration. D. The manufacturer's operating manual. Correct answer. B. The aircraft's maintenance logbook. Explanation. The maintenance logbook documents compliance with airworthiness directives ADs, which are mandatory for aircraft safety and compliance, 14 CFR Part 39. It includes records of repairs, modifications, and inspections. The operations manual option and certificate of registration option C are useful but do not track AD compliance. The manufacturer's manual option D provides guidance on aircraft operation, not compliance with regulations. Question 20. An aviation safety inspector is reviewing an airline safety management system, SMS. The airline has identified several hazards but has not yet implemented mitigation strategies. What should the inspector recommend? A. The airline should immediately stop operations until mitigation strategies are in place. B. The airline should conduct a risk assessment to prioritize hazards and implement mitigation strategies. C. No action is necessary since identifying hazards is sufficient for compliance. D. The airline should only mitigate the highest risk hazards, ignoring lower-level concerns. Correct answer. B. The airline should conduct a risk assessment to prioritize hazards and implement mitigation strategies. Explanation. The FAA requires air carriers to develop an SMS that includes hazard identification, risk assessment, and mitigation strategies. 14 CFR Part 5. Merely identifying hazards, option C, is insufficient without mitigation. A risk assessment, option B, helps prioritize which hazards to address first. Halting operations, option A, or only addressing the highest risks, option D, could be unnecessary and counterproductive. Question 21. What is the primary purpose of the NTSB's safety recommendations? A. To impose legal penalties on operators who fail to follow FAA regulations. B. To promote safety improvements across the aviation industry based on investigation findings. C. To penalize manufacturers for equipment malfunctions. D. To advise airlines on improving their financial performance. Correct answer. B. To promote safety improvements across the aviation industry based on investigation findings. Explanation. The NTSB's safety recommendations are issued to prevent future accidents by providing safety improvements based on investigation findings. 49 U.S. Code Section 1136. They are not designed to impose penalties, option A, or influence financial performance, option D. Manufacturers are not penalized through safety recommendations, option C, but they may be involved if their products contributed to safety issues. Question 22. An aviation safety inspector is reviewing an aircraft's corrosion inspection results. Which of the following is the most likely cause for concern during the inspection? Of a small, isolated scratch on the aircraft's fuselage. B. Surface corrosion found on the aircraft's wings near the engine mounts. C. A minor paint chip on the tail section of the aircraft. D. A slight discoloration on the aircraft's windows. Correct answer. B. Surface corrosion found on the aircraft's wings near the engine mounts. Explanation. Surface corrosion on critical structures such as the wings near engine mounts, option B, is a significant safety concern because it can affect the aircraft's structural integrity. Minor cosmetic issues like scratches, option A, paint chips, option C, or discoloration on windows, option D, are not as critical unless they affect the aircraft's functionality or safety. Question 23. Ms. Richards is conducting a ramp inspection at a regional airport and notices that the aircraft's pitot tube cover is still in place, despite the fact that the aircraft is about to depart. The pilot confirms they forgot to remove it. What action should Ms. Richards take? A. Allow the aircraft to proceed, as this is a common oversight. B. Immediately ground the aircraft until the pitot tube cover is removed and inspected. C. Issue a warning to the crew and allow the flight to proceed with a delayed departure. D. Report the issue to the FAA, but do not take any immediate action. Correct answer. B. Immediately ground the aircraft until the pitot tube cover is removed and inspected. Explanation. The pitot tube is critical for airspeed measurements, and a cover left on it can lead to inaccurate readings, endangering flight safety. 14 CFR Part 91.205. This is a serious oversight that must be corrected before the flight departs. Allowing the aircraft to proceed, options A and C, or reporting the issue without action, option D, would compromise safety. Question 24. Which of the following is a key component of an effective flight crew training program? A. Emphasis on routine procedures to ensure pilots maintain proficiency. B. Focus on maximizing the use of flight automation to reduce pilot workload. C. Simulations of emergency and non-routine scenarios to test decision-making under pressure. D. Prioritizing theoretical knowledge over practical skills. Correct answer. C. Simulations of emergency and non-routine scenarios to test decision-making under pressure. Explanation. Flight crew training must emphasize practical, real-world scenarios, especially emergencies, to ensure pilots are prepared for high-pressure situations. FAA AC 12035B. Routine procedures, option A, and automation, option B, are important, but emergency simulations, option C, are crucial for developing strong decision-making skills. Prioritizing theory over practical skills, option D, would not adequately prepare pilots for the challenges they will face in real operations. Question 25. What is a primary objective of the FAA's accident investigation procedures? A. To determine who was at fault for the accident. B. To gather evidence that can be used in legal proceedings. C. To identify safety issues and prevent future accidents. D. To assess the financial impact of the accident on the airline involved. Correct answer: C. To identify safety issues and prevent future accidents. Explanation: the primary objective of accident investigations under the FAA and NTSB is to identify contributing factors and safety issues to prevent future accidents. 49 U.S. Code Section 1131. Determining fault, option A, and financial impacts, option D, are secondary to the goal of improving safety. Question 26. Which of the following is a potential consequence of failing to comply with a service bulletin issued by the aircraft manufacturer? A minor increase in maintenance costs. B. A temporary reduction in aircraft performance. C. Compromise of the aircraft's airworthiness and potential safety risks. D. Increased efficiency of aircraft operations. Correct answer: C. Compromise of the aircraft's airworthiness and potential safety risks. Explanation: service bulletins provide important updates on aircraft systems and maintenance practices to ensure airworthiness and safety. 14 CFR Part 39. Failure to comply with these directives, option C, could result in safety risks. Minor cost increases, option A, or performance reductions, option B, are secondary concerns. Question 27. Which of the following is an essential requirement for an aircraft to be considered airworthy under FAA regulations? A. The aircraft must meet the manufacturer's specifications and all applicable airworthiness directives. B. The aircraft must have the most up-to-date avionics installed. C. The aircraft must have a paint job that meets the latest aesthetic standards. D. The aircraft must operate at the highest possible fuel efficiency. Correct answer: A. The aircraft must meet the manufacturer's specifications and all applicable airworthiness directives. Explanation: airworthiness is determined by whether an aircraft meets the manufacturer's specifications and complies with all applicable airworthiness directives. 14 CFR Part 91.403. Avionics updates, option B, or cosmetic factors, option C, do not affect airworthiness, and fuel efficiency, option D, is not a defining criterion. Question 28. During a safety audit, an aviation safety inspector discovers several incomplete or inaccurate maintenance records. What should the inspector do? A. Allow the airline to continue operations, as minor record discrepancies are common. B. Immediately suspend the airline's operating certificate. C. Require corrective action and verify that maintenance records are brought into compliance. D. Ignore the discrepancies if they do not appear to have affected the aircraft's safety. Correct answer: C. Require corrective action and verify that maintenance records are brought into compliance. Explanation: accurate and complete maintenance records are required under 14 CFR Part 43.9. Inaccuracies or omissions must be corrected promptly. Allowing operations to continue, option A, or ignoring the discrepancies, option D, would violate regulatory standards. Suspending operations, option B, is a drastic measure and should only be considered if the issue compromises safety. Question 29. Which of the following actions should an aviation safety inspector take if they observe unsafe flight crew behavior during an operational inspection? A. Immediately arrest the crew members. B. Allow the crew to continue the flight and report the behavior afterward. C. Ground the aircraft and remove the crew from duty until further investigation. D. Issue a warning and allow the crew to continue the flight with heightened supervision. Correct answer: C. Ground the aircraft and remove the crew from duty until further investigation. Explanation: safety is the top priority. If unsafe behavior is observed, the aircraft should be grounded and the crew removed until an investigation is conducted. This ensures that the flight crew's actions do not compromise safety. Allowing the crew to continue options B and D or arresting them, option A, is not appropriate without further assessment. Question 30. Which of the following would likely require an aviation safety inspector to issue an emergency airworthiness directive? A newly discovered defect that poses an immediate threat to safety. B. A routine safety recommendation that can be addressed at the next scheduled inspection. C. An issue that could potentially affect the aircraft's fuel efficiency. D. A minor cosmetic defect that does not affect aircraft operation. Correct answer: A newly discovered defect that poses an immediate threat to safety. Explanation: an emergency airworthiness directive is issued when a safety issue is discovered that poses an immediate threat to flight safety, 14 CFR Part 39. Routine recommendations option B, efficiency concerns option C, and cosmetic defects option D do not typically warrant emergency action.